All right, guys, we got 2 days left. Got 2 videos left. We'll do it today. We'll do it tomorrow. Make sure that you pay back attention tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow. I got a special message for you guys. But here we go. So today we're going to start Unit 5. Now, unfortunately, I've been trying to keep the videos down to 5 minutes. This one might be a little bit longer because we're trying to condense a lot of information into 2 days. I'm not going to give you everything, but we are going to condense it as much as we can. So in Unit 5, what we're going to discuss is anything from the menstrual cycle to sexual reproduction, to stages of labor, to fetal development, and then we'll also talk about birth defects. All right. So let's start off with talking about the menstrual cycle for a female. So it's impossible to talk about sexual reproduction unless we understand the menstrual cycle for females. All right. Most females are going to be roughly 28 days. Okay. Now, as you guys are in high school, you are not going to be 28 days. All right. Oftentimes you're going to be very irregular, and that's perfectly normal. Furthermore, if you are an athlete and you're constantly training and you have low amounts of body fat, those people oftentimes are not 28 days. I'll give you an example. When I was in college, a lot of times I was in class with some cross-country runners. Some of them were my best friends in college. And because they had such low body fat and they were constantly training, oftentimes they would not have a period for sometimes 3 or even 4 months. All right, so they went for occasionally over 100 days without having a period. All right, so let's get to this. So if a menstrual cycle, a girl is normally 28 days, especially when she gets older. All right, if it's 28 days, all right, that is the menstrual cycle. Here's what guys don't understand. Day 1, all right, gentlemen, we always hear this. We hear the word period. All right, and we've been brought up in grammar school. We always hear the word period. We always think at the end of a sentence, right? Not in this case. Her period is day 1. All right, so day 1 is her period. All right, that's when she starts to bleed. All right, day 1 of this cycle. All right, so we'll go there. And now, as she is going through this cycle, all right, let's pull this up here. All right. We're improvising. Small chart. Sorry, we couldn't do this in class. What she is doing is she's building up a bloody tissue inside her uterus. All right, so this starts to fill up with blood. Okay. Well, that's important to understand because when she releases an egg later on, and we'll get to this. All right. That egg, if it gets united with sperm, it needs to embed in some tissue. It would be like a seed that you're trying to plant. If you throw it on concrete and there's nothing to embed it to, there's no soil, it's never going to grow. All right? So every single day, the lining of her uterus gets thicker and thicker. All right? So every single day, this lining is going to get a little bit thicker, more and more. All right? On the middle of her cycle, which in this case, if she's 28 days is her period, what would be the middle of the cycle? Well, somewhere around day 14, give or take a day or two. All right. So if we go here, middle of her cycle, which would be day 14 down here. If we numbered all these 2, 3, 4, 5, so on, all the way down to this is when she will release an egg. All right. So here we'll make this egg red. All right. Well, where are eggs stored up? Eggs are stored up in women's ovaries. Okay, so we'll put some eggs here. All right. So one of these ovaries is going to release an egg. Occasionally, you can release multiple eggs. We can have twins, but we'll get into that tomorrow when we understand twins. But for this case, let's say one egg gets released at this point. Okay, somewhere in the middle of her cycle. All right, so we're day 14. Now, in the meantime, this egg is not just going to immediately come all the way down here to this uterus. All right, it takes a long journey for it to go through the fallopian tubes. All right, so in the meantime, this tissue and this uterus keeps on getting filled up with more bloody tissue. All right. And if she's 28 days, she will then finally excrete all of that tissue. It'll leave her, and then she'll start a new menstrual cycle. All right. So a woman cannot necessarily get pregnant if she hasn't released the egg, and a lot of teenage girls don't understand this. So let's kind of backtrack here for a second. Sperm can last all the way up, certainly 24 hours, and we know some sperm can last 48 hours, and we've even heard in some rare occasions it lasting 72 hours. So let's go back to this thought here. If a girl has her period, so she bleeds from day 1 to day 5. Okay, most girls will bleed somewhere 3 to 5 days. All right. So day 6, 7, or 8, she might think about engaging in some sexual intercourse. Okay. Again, we're going to preach abstinence as much as we can until you get married. But let's say a male and a female, they're married and they want to have kids. All right. If they proceed to have sex on day 5, 6, 7, okay, right after she has stopped bleeding, but she doesn't ovulate, she doesn't release that egg until 5, 6 days later, she's not getting pregnant at that point. Okay. So a lot of times people will think, at least teenagers think, oh, if they have sex, they're automatically going to get pregnant. That's not the case. Okay, you can't get pregnant unless the egg is released. All right. So, but here's the tricky part. If you're not regular, you're not 28 days, and we know that there's some girls that will have shorter periods. Some girls will have longer. So if a girl was having a 40-day cycle, when is she releasing her egg? Somewhere around day 20. Let's say it's a short cycle. Let's say she has a 22-day cycle. All right, that means she's releasing that egg around day 11. Does that make sense? So it's really hard to always predict when the most fertile time for a female. Okay, unless you're checking body temperature and other things. So it's always tricky for a teenager if they are engaged in sexual activity. We hope, again, that you're not. But if that was the case, you got to be extremely, extremely careful. So let's get into what's going on here. All right. So this egg is released. All right. Very good. Now we will. Sorry, I don't have another blue marker. I have one for the uterus. And anyway, so here we go. Let's say a male ejaculates sperm. Okay. Now, when a male ejaculates, you got about 3 million guys of sperm. All right, so that's a lot. But immediately, about a third of them are going to die off. Okay, they're not ripe. All right, they're not healthy sperm, and you're going to have a ton more that's never going to make it past the cervix. Well, why? All right, the vagina is a mucous membrane. There's so much mucus in here. All right. Oftentimes, the sperm cannot swim through mucus. We talked about that a little bit with asthma. As the lungs fill up with that mucus, sometimes medicine can't get through. Okay. Well, if medicine can't get through, oftentimes a sperm would not be able to get through. So about 10% will actually make it past the cervix. Well, as these sperm are swimming up here, if the sperm swims happen down this fallopian tube, not getting pregnant. Okay, if the sperm would happen to swim on this fallopian tube where there was an egg that was released, yeah, certainly a high chance of pregnancy. So if this sperm and egg unite, great. Now you will have about 4 or 5 days for this to travel all the way down into the uterus. All right, and then let's get rid of that, and then embed somewhere in the lining right here. Okay, and over this time, what you're going to end up having is a lot of fetal development. Okay, so let's talk about this fetal development. All right, so here we go. I just broke it down to this, and you guys can take a picture, whatever you got to. You got this in your notes. All right, you can see a lot of the development happens in trimester 1. All right, heart develops, brain develops. Now they're not fully developed; they're just beginning to develop. So how early do they begin to develop? Well, we already know by week 3, 4, 5, 6, all these things are starting to develop. Again, not fully developed at this point. Heart, brain, eyes, placenta. Get to the placenta. That is what gives that baby nutrients, all right, from mom. All right. So when this baby, okay, or this fetus, I should say, is in this amniotic sac, all right. Well, has to get some new types of nutrients. It has to be able to breathe. And the way it is able to breathe is through this placenta. And the placenta is a thicker part. Do it in this color marker. This thicker part here provides more blood for this fetus. All right. So if we drew this fetus, he's not upside down just quite yet. Put into the umbilical cord. That's how that baby is starting to get the nutrients and oxygen that it needs. Right? A lot of people think that it's just breathing amniotic fluid. It's not. Okay, it's getting the red blood cells. That's what's providing that oxygen for him. Okay, all right. So that's the placenta. All right, and then we obviously have bone growth, and that should say CNS, and that would stand for central nervous system. Most miscarriages occur during this time too. You have so much more development occurring, so many things can go wrong during this time. All right, week 2, skin begins developed. Okay, so if you ever look at some type of video about fetal development, yeah, you're going to actually be able to see the heart and everything else because the skin is not there. All right, but anyway, by the week 16, skin begins to develop. You could probably be able to determine gender before week 18. Excuse me, but it's very hard oftentimes to do that with ultrasound machines. They're going to be able to just wait a couple extra weeks. It's much easier for the technicians who are running those machines to be able to identify. Certainly, so by week 20, most people will know their gender of their baby if they choose to do it. And by week 24, all organs are developed, okay, fully except one, and that is the lungs, okay? So occasionally you'll hear about kids dying premature. Oftentimes it's due to lung development, not necessarily due to any other organs, okay? Occasionally a heart, but mostly the lungs. Lungs are going to be developed a lot more by week 27. They still might not be fully developed yet, okay? You might still even have to wait to about week 29, but typically by week 27, we start seeing some serious maturation with those. By week 32, all that means is they're gaining weight. I just wrote down adding fat, okay? Because a baby will actually lose weight after they're born, okay, for the first couple of days. By week 36, they're considered full term. If a female happens to go into delivery, or labor, a couple weeks early, not a big deal once you hit week 36. Doctors are not going to be concerned about it. And then by the 40th week is their due date. All right, so that gives you a little bit of idea on that. So let's move on. So once a female goes through her stages of labor, goes through the trimesters in terms of fetal development, now it's time for the baby. All right, so stages of labor. I just wrote these real short, concise. Stage 1, contractions begin. Well, what are contractions? Again, their stomach muscles, they're cramping. All right, it's pushing down here on the uterus. So it's all these muscles that are surrounding the uterus, pushing in, and pushing the baby downward. Okay, contractions are a good thing. Right? It expels the fluid out of the baby's lungs. So when the baby is delivered, right, you oftentimes see a doctor or a nurse run right over as soon as the baby comes out and takes essentially a suction, like almost like a turkey baster, and being able to suck the mucus out of their nose and mouth. Right? But having those contractions pushing in on a baby's chest is a good thing. That gets all that amniotic fluid out. All right, but what are the contractions doing? All right, so you might have contractions might be 10 minutes apart, and they might only be a few seconds. Maybe they're only 3 seconds. All right, a woman has that pain for 3 seconds. Oh, and then it goes away. Well, she might quickly dismiss it as thinking it was some type of the way she was sitting, positioning, or whatever. She might not necessarily think that she's quite in labor. But then those contractions won't be 10 minutes apart. Maybe they're now down to 8 minutes apart. And maybe that contraction isn't 3 seconds. Maybe it's now 5 seconds or 6 seconds. And now you can kind of see how contractions are getting closer together in terms of time, but they're becoming more intense. They're stronger, and they are coming longer in duration, from 3 seconds to 5 seconds, 6 seconds, maybe 10 seconds, maybe even eventually getting all the way up to 20 to 30 seconds. All right? So the cervix right here has to open to 10 centimeters, right, before a baby's head can fit through the birth canal. So when the baby's head starts going through the birth canal, it's called crowning. All right, perfectly fine. That's what we want. We don't want something that's called breech or transverse. Breech means a baby's coming down feet first or even butt first. All right, that's called a breech baby. Baby's coming down sideways, it's referred to as a transverse. Not very likely on either case. You got 4% of most babies are breeched. All right, 4% is not extremely high. And then about 1 out of every 200 births are transverse. Well, they're not going to go ahead and take, at that point, they're not going to do a vaginal birth. They're going to do emergency C-section on that female. So we'll get to C-sections here in a moment. And then after the baby does come out, all right, let's pretend that it's not a breech baby or a transverse baby. It's a normal delivery. All right, after the baby is out, baby's cleaned off, suctioned out all the mucus. The doctor is still going to have to go back and get the placenta out of the mother. Okay, all right, as well as cutting obviously the umbilical cord. All right, so let's move this. Why would a woman perhaps need a C-section? Well, again, C-section is called the proper term is a cesarean section. All right, so they're just going to cut a line right there. Oftentimes it's what they refer to as a bikini cut. So they're going to cut right on the line where a woman's swimwear would be, or her underwear. So it's not, hopefully not exposed if she would choose to wear a bikini on the beach. Sometimes you would see it, sometimes you would not. But anyway, so reasons for C-section. Perhaps if the baby's too big. Hopefully that's not the case anymore. We got pretty good ultrasounds, so they're usually able to identify how much the baby is going to weigh as well as length, and they're pretty good on that information. So oftentimes that's not the case anymore, but that used to be a common occurrence. If the mom is having twins or triplets, most likely they're going to go C-section. If the mother is too exhausted, she's too tired, she can't push anymore. If the mother's in distress, so maybe mom's heart rate has dropped so much, or baby's in distress and their heart rate has dropped too much, or some other complication, blood pressure, whatever the case is, if they're worried about that, they'll go emergency C-section. And when you do emergency C-section, guys, this is quick. A doctor could do truly emergency C-section and probably get the baby out within 2 to 3 minutes. A normal C-section takes about 5. So a doctor can get it out very, very quickly by making that cut, that incision, and getting it out. All right. We already talked about breech or transverse, or as well as if mom had a sexually transmitted disease. If a mom, let's say, for example, had herpes and she had blisters, you wouldn't want that baby to come through where it could pop a blister. Now you have those types of fluids that could be mixing in with the baby. We do have bloody tissue at the time of birth. So you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want to be able to expose a baby to that type of sexually transmitted disease. So they would do C-section if that was the case, if there was certainly an outbreak. Hopefully that clears up that in a nutshell. That is a really, really condensed version, but I try to keep it short and sweet. Tomorrow we'll talk about birth defects, genetic and non-genetic birth defects. And guys, sorry to condense everything into such a short period of time. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, contact me, and we'll get through this. All right, take care. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.